History's full of stories we think we know. Tales of princesses, castles, and knights in shining armor. But sometimes, buried deep beneath the cobblestones of the past, we find a story that isn't a fairy tale at all. This is one of those stories. It's a chilling mystery that begins not in a storybook, but in the heart of 19th century France, with the clang of a hammer against stone. The year is 1867. The place, the ancient Saint-Lazare Monastery, a sprawling complex whose walls have stood for centuries, holding secrets within their cold embrace. For years, the monastery had been a place of both worship and confinement, housing everyone from monks to political prisoners. Now, it was undergoing a massive renovation, its old stones being reshaped for a new era. Workers moved through the dusty halls, their voices echoing where once only prayers were whispered. They were tasked with restoring the entire structure, every chapel, every corridor, every tower. But one tower stood apart from the rest. It was an anomaly, a stone sentinel with no obvious purpose. It had no door, no staircase leading up to it. It was as if the builders had simply stacked stones one on top of the other, sealing it off from the world. There was no mention of it in the monastery's recent records, no hint as to what lay inside. To the workers, it was just another forgotten part of an old building. But curiosity is a powerful force. Driven by the need to understand the building they were transforming, the foreman gave the order. The wall had to come down. With heavy tools, the workers began to chip away at the mortar, each blow sending vibrations through the centuries-old stone. It was slow, arduous work. Dust filled the air, catching the light in hazy beams. Finally, with a deep groan, the stones gave way, tumbling inward and revealing a darkness that had not seen the light of day for decades, maybe even centuries. The air that rushed out was stale and cold, carrying the scent of damp stone and something else, the smell of time itself. As their eyes adjusted to the gloom, the workers peered into the opening. They found themselves looking into a small, narrow chamber. It was more of a cell than a room. The walls were bare, the stone weeping with moisture. High above, a single slit-like window offered the only glimpse of the outside world, a sliver of sky that must have seemed 1,000,000 miles away. And that's when they saw it. Something that turned this routine renovation into a haunting discovery. Hanging from an iron bar set deep into the stone beneath the window was a rusted chain. It swayed gently in the sudden draft, a silent pendulum marking a time that had long since stopped. And there, on the cold stone floor, lay what the chain had once held. The skeletal remains of a human being. A hush fell over the work site. The noise of construction faded into a respectful silence. Who was this person? A doctor was called to the scene. After a careful examination, he determined the remains belonged to a young girl, no older than 17. Her bones told a story of a life cut brutally short, a life spent in unimaginable isolation. There were no signs of a struggle, no indication she had ever tried to break free. It was as if she had simply accepted her fate. Her confinement was absolute. She was not meant to leave. Ever. The discovery sent shockwaves through the local community. The monastery officials, when questioned, claimed to have no knowledge of the sealed tower or its tragic occupant. They insisted it was a relic of a much older, harsher time, a period they knew nothing about. But as historians and amateur sleuths began to dig into the past, a darker picture started to emerge. Whispers from old town records and fragmented documents pointed to a grim possibility. In centuries past, it wasn't uncommon for powerful families to deal with inconvenient members in secret. A daughter who brought shame upon the family name, perhaps through a forbidden romance or a perceived moral transgression, could be quietly erased from society. Rather than face a public scandal, she would be sent away, not to a convent where she might find some semblance of a life, but to a place like this, a forgotten room in a forgotten tower, where her existence could be denied and eventually forgotten entirely. Was this her story? Was she the daughter of a nobleman, a girl whose only crime was to love the wrong person, or perhaps to simply defy the rigid expectations of her time? We will likely never know her name. No record of a trial exists. No burial was ever recorded. She was simply gone. Further investigation of the tower itself revealed another heartbreaking detail. A small, bricked-up opening was found in one of the walls, just large enough to pass through a small plate of food. Local legends, suddenly given a terrifying new context, spoke of a time when food was delivered to the tower. This suggested that for a time, someone knew she was in there. Someone was keeping her alive, a prisoner sustained by scraps, until one day the deliveries stopped. The opening was sealed, and she was left to her fate. Starvation? Dehydration? Alone in the dark. The tower was a cage, and for this young girl, there was no escape. The image is hauntingly familiar, isn't it? A beautiful young woman locked away in a high tower. It's the story of Rapunzel. But this was no fairy tale. There was no prince to hear her song, no magical hair to climb. There was no rescue, no happy ending. There was only the cold, hard reality of a life erased, a story of injustice, silenced by stone walls and the passage of time. In the aftermath of the discovery, the story of the real-life Rapunzel became a local sensation, a dark footnote in the history of Saint. But as quickly as it had appeared, the story began to fade. The monastery, keen to distance itself from the gruesome find, quietly had the tower dismantled. The stones that had held a girl captive for so long were scattered, and the physical evidence of her prison was erased. The documents that might have shed light on her identity remained missing, perhaps deliberately destroyed centuries ago. The system that had imprisoned her worked one last time to conceal its crime. What we are left with is a ghost, a question mark in the margins of history. Who was she? What were her dreams? Did she ever hold out hope that someone would come for her? Did she watch the seasons change through that single, narrow window, her only connection to a world she would never rejoin? Her story is a powerful reminder that behind the grand narratives of history, the wars, the kings, the revolutions, there are countless individual lives, many of them forgotten, their voices silenced. The girl in the tower represents all of them, the voiceless. They erased. Her story is not one of fantasy, but of the brutal reality of power and the injustices inflicted on those who have none. She is a symbol of a past that is often far darker and more complex than we imagine. She is the real-life Rapunzel, not the one from the storybooks, but the one who was left behind. A tragic secret buried by time, waiting for a chance to finally be heard. Her name is lost, but her story, once uncovered, must never be forgotten. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the past. If you find stories like this as compelling as we do, please consider subscribing to our channel for more explorations of history's forgotten mysteries. Your support helps us keep these stories alive.